this woman had the audacity to show up at my door demanding I pay $3,200 in HOA fees for a neighborhood I never joined. Then when I refused, she sent fake cops to arrest me. But here's what she didn't know. I owned the land her precious HOA office was built on. The fake badge made that cheap asterisk tap asterisk sound against my door while her sickeningly sweet perfume burned my nostrils. Two men in polo shirts with plastic badges were trying to intimidate a widowed mechanic on his own property. The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. What would you do if Karen next door tried to steal $3,000 from you, then sent fake police? When you said no? 'Cause what happened next is every HOA victim's dream come true. I didn't just fight back. I completely destroyed their entire corrupt operation. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this revenge story has everything. Fake cops, financial fraud, a public meltdown, and the sweetest justice you'll ever see. My name is Marcus Kellerman, and 6 months ago, I thought I'd found peace. After losing my wife Sarah to cancer 2 years back, I needed a fresh start somewhere quiet. That's when I inherited my grandmother Rose's old farmhouse in Millbrook County. 3.2 acres of pure tranquility with a 1940s stone house, weathered barn, and the workshop where I could rebuild engines and maybe rebuild myself. The crunch of gravel under my work boots each morning felt like coming home. The smell of motor oil mixed with sawdust from my woodworking projects and the sound of wind through those ancient oak trees. It was exactly what my grieving soul needed. Grandma Rose had lived there for 60 years, raising chickens and vegetables. Completely self-sufficient on land her father bought when the area was still farmland. But 5 years ago, developers swooped in and built Willowbrook Estates all around my property. 200 identical cookie-cutter homes with perfect lawns and matching mailboxes. They created an HOA to manage their pools, landscaping, and community center. Fair enough. What wasn't fair was assuming they could rope in property that predated their subdivision by 8 decades. Enter Delilah Hutchcraft, age 47. HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood dictator. Picture every entitled suburban mom stereotype rolled into one perfectly manicured package. She drove a white Escalade, wore a designer workout clothes to grocery shop, and used her HOA authority like a weapon to mask her deep insecurity about being a city transplant in a rural community. The smell of her expensive perfume announced her arrival before her engine did. She marched up to my door that Tuesday morning, clipboard armed and loaded with a stack of violation notices thicker than a phone book. From the Willowbrook HOA, we need to discuss your property compliance issues. I wiped grease off my hands with an old rag. Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. I'm not part of any HOA. Her smile was sharper than broken glass. Actually, when the county rezoned this area for residential development, all properties were automatically included in our association. You owe $3,200 in back due fees, and your monthly assessment going forward will be $250. I pulled out my property deed, the one I'd studied dozens of times since inheriting the place. This land has been in my family since 1945. I never signed any HOA agreement. The rezoning supersedes individual property rights, she said, like she'd memorized it from a legal manual. Your unkempt lawn, that commercial vehicle, she pointed, at my work truck, and that unapproved structure, my barn, built in 1960, are all violations of community standards. I tried staying reasonable. Look, I'll maintain the property better if it's bothering folks, but I'm not paying for services I don't need your landscaping crew or your pool maintenance. Her eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. She handed me a fancy legal notice printed on cream-colored paper. You have 30 days to comply, or we'll place a lien on your property. I have connections in local government, Mr. Kellerman. This can go easy or hard. That night, I spread all of Grandma's old papers across my kitchen table. Property surveys, tax records, utility easements, and tucked in between them, something interesting. The HOA's incorporation papers had been filed improperly, and according to county records, my property boundaries extended further south than I'd realized. Here's something every property owner should know. Asterisk, property boundary surveys always. Trump subdivision plats, when there's a legal conflict, asterisk. Always request an official survey before accepting any O's claimed jurisdiction. But I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole would go, or that Delilah's desperation had nothing to do with my lawn, and everything to do with covering up the biggest fraud our county had ever seen. 2 days after I refused Delilah's demands, she escalated faster than I expected. I was elbow deep in my neighbor's pickup engine when unfamiliar voices drifted across my driveway, a kind of authoritative tone that makes your stomach drop. Two men in matching blue polo shirts stood by my mailbox, clipboards ready for battle. The taller one had a gut that screamed mall security, while his skinny partner kept clicking his pen like a nervous tick. Both wore badges hanging from lanyards that looked about as official as a kid's sheriff costume. "Marcus Kellerman," gut guy announced, "County Code Enforcement. We're here about multiple violations on this property." I wiped grease off my hands. With a rag, studying their fake badges up close. My late wife had worked for the county assessor's office, so I knew what real government IDs looked like. These weren't even close. "Can I see some official identification?" They exchanged that look people give when they realize they're in over their heads. "These citations are for operating commercial vehicles in a residential zone, unpermitted structures, and noise violations during restricted hours." The paperwork looked professionally printed, I'll give them that. But real county inspectors don't show up unannounced. They definitely don't care about your HOA disputes. "What department are you with exactly?" "Environmental and zoning enforcement," the skinny one mumbled, avoiding eye contact like a teenager caught sneaking out. I memorized their white pickup's license plate. While they handed over their fake citations, the acrid smell of diesel exhaust hung in the morning air as they practically burned rubber getting out of my driveway. 20 minutes later, I had the county clerk on the phone. "Hi, I just received citations from your environmental and zoning enforcement officers. Could you walk me through the appeal process?" "Sir," the clerk said slowly, "we don't have an environmental and zoning enforcement department." "Exactly. Gave you these citations?" And there it was. Delilah had crossed the line from petty HOA tyranny into actual criminal behavior. I remembered reading somewhere that impersonating government officials carries serious jail time, usually 3 to 5 years depending on the state. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a felony. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Deputy Martinez at the sheriff's department, spreading out photos of the fake badges and their license plate number. "Let me run these plates," he said, typing into his computer. "Well, that's interesting. Vehicles registered to Willowbrook Property Management, LLC. Same address as the HOA office." I asked. "Bingo. Mr. Kellerman, this is more serious than typical neighbor disputes. I'd strongly recommend security cameras. People desperate enough to impersonate officers tend to escalate their tactics." I spent the next morning installing a 4-camera system, driveway, workshop, front porch, and back gate. While I was mounting the last camera, Delilah launched her neighborhood smear campaign. My phone started buzzing with next-door notifications about an emergency community meeting to discuss problematic property owner behavior and protecting our investments from declining property values. Mrs. Patterson shuffled over that evening with a plate of snickerdoodles and some neighborhood intelligence. The smell of cinnamon and butter reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen. "Marcus, honey, that woman's got some of the newer folks all twisted up. Just claiming you're planning to turn this place into some kind of auto salvage yard," I thanked her for the heads up and made a decision. If Delilah wanted a public forum, I'd give her one. I gathered my grandmother's original property deed, some historical photos from the 1940s, and headed to their next HOA meeting like an uninvited guest with a truth bomb. The community center was packed tighter than a rush-hour subway car. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice neighborly. "I'd like to address some concerns about my property." Delilah's face went from surprise to fury in about 2 seconds. "This is a private meeting for HOA members only. You're trespassing." "Actually, this is a public community center," I replied, pulling out the historical photos. "I think folks might be interested in seeing what this area looked like before Willowbrook Estates existed." The room buzzed with whispered conversations. I could see doubt creeping into some faces. But Delilah wasn't having it. "Security," she shouted, though there wasn't a security guard within 10 miles. "I want this man removed." As 3 uncomfortable-looking residents approached, I handed out copies of the historical photos. "Anyone who wants to discuss this like civilized neighbors knows where to find me." That night, Delilah filed a harassment complaint with the real police. When Officer Johnson showed up, his body language suggested he'd heard this song before. "Mr. Kellerman, I'll be straight with you. We've had multiple complaints about HOA overreach in this area. Just keep documenting everything." He was walking away. He stopped. "Oh, one more thing. That property management company from your fake officer incident. Same address as your HOA office building. I want to take a closer look at your property boundaries. I spread my property survey across the kitchen table that night. That HOA office building was sitting awfully close to what looked like my property line. If my growing suspicion was right, Delilah's desperation was about to make perfect criminal sense. 3 days after my uninvited appearance at the HOA meeting, a certified letter arrived from a law firm. The cease and desist letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, demanding I stop everything from interfering with lawful HOA operations to causing property damage through negligent tree maintenance. I hired Peterson Land Surveying, too. $100 felt steep, but my grandmother used to say, buy truth, even if it costs you. I also found an attorney, David Blackwood, who specialized in property disputes. Marcus, he said, the fact that they sent fake government officials tells me they're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and mistakes create evidence. The survey crew arrived on a foggy Tuesday morning. Around noon, the lead surveyor called out, Mr. Kellerman, hey, you might want to see this. Your property line extends about 30 feet further south than your old survey indicated. My heart started pounding. That strip of land included the exact spot where the HOA had built their office building. Are you telling me their office is on my property? According to our measurements and the county's original land grants, yes, sir. About half that building is sitting on land you own. She wasn't done escalating. Caught her red-handed parking in my driveway? This driveway easement is HOA common area, she announced. You're required to share access? 20 minutes later, she was back with a landscaping crew that started dismantling my mailbox. This structure violates community aesthetic standards, she told the confused workers. I called the post office immediately. Someone just removed my mailbox claiming HOA authority. Can they do that? It's absolutely not, the postal supervisor said. Mail delivery obstruction is a federal offense. File a complaint immediately. That afternoon, I drove to Home Depot and bought the biggest, most beautiful mailbox they had. Solid cast iron with Kellerman Est, 1945 engraved on the side. If Delilah wanted a mailbox war, she'd picked the wrong mechanic. The vandalism started exactly 1 week later. I woke up to find all 4 tires on my work truck slashed. But here's where Delilah made her first major mistake. She didn't know about my backup security cameras. I'd hidden 2 additional cameras in the old oak tree and behind the barn. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m., and there she was, Delilah Hutchcraft herself, directing 2 men in dark hoodies as they slashed my tires. I called my insurance company, and then I called the sheriff. The fraud unit was already looking into Willowbrook property management. Detective Williams was very interested in my hidden camera footage. That afternoon, I got a call from Jake Morrison, the HOA treasurer. He sounded shaky. Marcus, I need to talk to you privately. There are some financial things that don't add up. You met at a diner. He slid a manila envelope across the table. I made copies. Marcus, I think she's been stealing from every family. In this neighborhood, bank statements inside told a story of systematic theft payments to shell companies, inflated contracts with family members, and cash withdrawals that disappeared into Delilah's personal accounts. We were talking about nearly $200,000 over 3 years. Jake, I asked, why are you showing me this? Because I figured out something else, he said, his voice dropping. That office building. It's not sitting on HOA land. It's on my land. I finished. My attorney, David Blackwood, sat across from me at my kitchen table, which was now covered in Jake's smuggled documents. Marcus, this is bigger than we thought, he said. We're looking at nearly $180,000 in fraudulent expenditures. But the real bombshell came when we traced the office building's ownership. Delilah hadn't just built on my land. She personally owned the building through an LLC. Let me get this straight, I said. She built a building on my property then. Charges the HOA $4,200 a month to rent space in a building she owns, using money stolen from homeowners' fees. It gets worse, David said, pointing to the tax records. The office building parcel was never legally separated from your property. She's been avoiding thousands in annual property taxes by letting you pay them. The phone buzzed. It was Detective Williams. County auditor wants to meet. Property tax irregularities flagged in the system. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The meeting with Auditor Patricia Colson confirmed everything. Mr. Kellerman, you officially own the ground their building sits on. Ms. Hutchcraft has been operating a tax avoidance scheme while collecting rent for property she doesn't legally control. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Marcus, sometimes doing right costs more than doing nothing. But sleeping peacefully is worth every penny. That evening, I called David. I want to expose everything, not just my property dispute. Whole financial fraud. These families deserve to know where their money went. Marcus, that means bigger risks, higher costs, and months of legal battles. Are you sure? I looked out at the neighborhood lights twinkling through my oak trees. I'm sure. Let's bring this house of cards down. The war room took shape in my workshop over the next 3 days. Maps, financial documents, and legal papers covered every flat surface. My allies gathered around the workbench where I usually rebuilt engines. Now we were rebuilding justice. Mrs. Patterson arrived first, carrying a thermos of coffee and a box of historical documents. Marcus, honey, I remember when your grandmother bought this land. The original deed shows water rights and mineral access that extend all the way to Miller's Creek. Jake Morrison looked nervous but determined as he spread HOA bank statements across my tool cabinet. I've been treasurer for 2 years, but I never had access to the master account. Delilah always said it was too complicated for non-professionals to understand. Sarah Polson, an investigative reporter from the county newspaper Jake had contacted, was our final piece. She had been tracking developer fraud in the region for a year. Your situation isn't unique, Marcus, she explained, her voice low and serious. Delilah's LLC, Community Management Solutions, is a subsidiary of a much larger development corporation we're investigating for racketeering. They install a puppet HOA president, drain the funds through family-owned contractors, and then dissolve the management company, leaving the homeowners with a bankrupt association and shoddy infrastructure. Your fight could be the key to exposing the entire network. David laid out the plan. Step 1. We file a quiet title action to legally establish your ownership of the land under that office. Step 2. We file for an immediate injunction to freeze all HOA bank accounts and bar Delilah from accessing any records. Step 3. We hand-deliver this entire package of evidence to the district attorney's office. Sarah, you publish your story the same day the lawsuit is filed. Delilah must have sensed the net closing in. That night, my security cameras caught something new. At 1:15 a.m., a dark sedan pulled up to the HOA office. 2 figures got out, the same 2 goons from the tire-slashing video. This time, they weren't carrying tire irons. They were carrying empty cardboard boxes. They used a key to enter the office, and for the next hour, my cameras recorded them hauling out file cabinets and computer towers.
Oh.
They were trying to destroy the evidence. They're too late, Jake whispered when I showed him the footage the next morning. I already backed up the server's financial data to a personal hard drive. The day we filed the lawsuit was a blur of calculated moves. At 9 a.m., David filed the paperwork at the courthouse. At 9:15 a.m., a process server walked up to Delilah as she was directing a landscaping crew to plant petunias by the Willowbrook entrance sign. The sight of her manicured smile dissolving into pure, unadulterated rage as she was served the lawsuit in front of half. The neighborhood was worth every penny of the legal fees. By 10 a.m., Sarah Polson's article hit the front page of the county newspaper's website, *** Willowbrook HOA, president accused of massive fraud embezzlement scheme. ***, the story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Phones buzzed, neighbors gathered in driveways, and suddenly the problematic property owner looked a lot like the only person who had been telling the truth. The climax came a week later, at an emergency community meeting called not by Delilah, but by the residents themselves. The community center was overflowing. People stood along the walls and spilled out the doors. Delilah stood at the podium, defiant, attempting to spin the narrative. This is a coordinated attack on our community by a disgruntled individual who refuses to follow the rules that protect our property values. Then I walked in, followed by David, Jake, and Detective Williams. I took the microphone. My name is Marcus Kellerman. This isn't about my lawn or my work truck. This is about your money. For the next 20 minutes, we laid it all out. David explained the illegal land seizure and the fraudulent tax scheme. Jake walked everyone through the bank statements, showing the payments to shell companies owned by Delilah's family. Then, I projected the security footage onto a large screen for the grand finale, the clear, high-definition video of Delilah directing the vandalism of my truck, followed by the footage of her cronies attempting to destroy evidence from the HOA office. The room was silent, then erupted. People were shouting, pointing, demanding answers. Cornered and exposed, Delilah had a complete meltdown. "You people are ungrateful," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I built this community. I made it beautiful. I deserved a little compensation for my efforts. You'd be nothing without me." In her tirade, she admitted to everything, taking the money, hiring the contractors, all of it. That was Detective Williams' cue. He and 2 other uniformed officers walked to the front of the room. "Delilah Hutchcraft, you are under arrest for embezzlement, insurance fraud, and conspiracy." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was met with a wave of applause from the residents. In the aftermath, the HOA was placed in court-ordered receivership. The residents elected a new board. With Jake Morrison as the president, they voted to dissolve the contract with the corrupt management company and hired a local, reputable firm. As for me, the court affirmed my ownership of the land. It's the office building which Delilah's LLC had to forfeit as part of the criminal settlement was now mine. After a community vote, we decided to lease the building to the new honest HOA for $1 a year. It would remain the community center, but now as a symbol of integrity, not corruption. 6 months later, I'm back in my workshop, the smell of motor oil and sawdust. Once again, a scent of peace, not conflict. The crunch of gravel under my boots is sometimes joined by the footsteps of neighbors stopping by not to complain, but to say thank you, or to ask if I can take a look at their lawnmower engine. I didn't just get my peace and quiet back. Found a community I never knew I was. Part of my grandmother's land is still a place of tranquility, but now it's also a place where a stand was made, proof that, with a little bit of courage and a whole lot of truth, one person can indeed make all the difference.